This case takes place in Australia in the year 2018. Hi, this case does have a few names in it, so you may have to listen just a little more closely than usual, but I've kept it as simple as can be. Bradley Lyons was a 30-year-old man who lived in Lakes Entrance in Australia, an area in the state of Victoria. At some point when Bradley was around 22-23, he met a woman by the name of Jana Hooper. At this time, Jana was around 28 years old, and she was a mother of 4. The two began a relationship and later married in 2011. However, according to court documents, the relationship was described as volatile. But despite their rocky foundations, the couple went on to have 3 little ones together, and as far as I can tell, Bradley also accepted Jana's other 4 kids, and the family lived together. As more time went on, the relationship worsened. The two would frequently fight, and these issues were only compounded by their consumption of illegal substances. Because of these issues, the authorities were called to the property on a number of occasions, and at one point, a protective order was also put in place. From 2017 to 2018, the issues the couple were dealing with worsened even further, to the point that the police were called to the property on a number of occasions. Bradley also had a brother named Zachary. In December of 2018, his brother became concerned that he had not heard from or seen Bradley in well over a week. This was something that he found to be incredibly strange. So, on the 11th of December 2018, Bradley's brother Zachary decided to contact the police and report him missing. Zachary knew right away that something was horribly wrong, but he could never have possibly imagined the horrors that would soon be uncovered. With this missing persons report, an officer headed over to Bradley and Jana's home. An officer knocked on the door and Jana answered. He asked where Bradley was. Jana responded by saying that she had last seen Bradley when they went to bed together on the 2nd of December, and by the morning, he was gone. She went on to say that Bradley had not taken his phone or wallet with him. And then she said something rather peculiar. Jana Hooper claimed that Bradley had told her before going missing that if he were to die, she would get $380,000. And then the conversation with the officer took a turn. Jana told the officer that she had confronted Bradley about forcing himself upon her daughters, and because of this allegation, he became incredibly angry. Jana then claimed that Bradley was known to disappear for a few days and then come back home safe and sound, so she wasn't too worried. The police found all of this to be rather strange, so whilst they were there, they carried out an inspection of the property. One officer noted that the home was filthy, but the master bedroom was meticulously clean, unusually clean. The police gathered all of this information and found much of it to be very suspicious. Now, Bradley and Jana did live together with their little ones. However, there was also another man living with them. The couple had a small detached property in their backyard, and living in this property was 24-year-old Nick Stefani. Nick was a below-average musician who rented the property from the couple. Nick had once dated Jana's sister, and through this, Bradley and Nick became friends. Nick had a troubled past. According to court documents, he was an intelligent man, but due to a turbulent upbringing, he ended up in the wrong crowd. This resulted in him committing a number of crimes, such as theft, burglary, and arson. And in October of 2018, he received a community correction order for firearms and bail offences. Nick would also frequently consume illegal substances, something that caused him many problems in his life. On the 13th of December 2018, 2 days after Jana gave her statement, Nick was also questioned by the police. He claimed that one of Jana's children had confided in him, saying that the girls had been essayed by Bradley. Nick Stefani claimed that he never saw Bradley on the day he vanished. However, the following day, he went over to Bradley and Jana's home, where Jana told him, "He's left me. He doesn't even love me." These stories didn't sit right with the police. They believed that Jana and Nick knew more, but they were covering their tracks. A few days passed, with no sign of Bradley anywhere. And so, the police decided to execute a search warrant at Jana's home on Wednesday, the 19th of December 2018. Whilst investigators were gathering evidence, they made a horrifying discovery. They found blood staining on the hallway wall. The blood appeared to have been cleaned up, but there were some remnants left behind. With this finding, officers wanted to grill Jana some more, hoping that she would slip up. It was obvious that foul play was involved. During this interview, Jana made some strange claims. First, she gave the same story she had told the officers before, claiming that she hadn't seen Bradley since the 2nd of December 2018. But officers made her aware that they didn't believe her story, and with this, she changed her version of events. Jana then claimed that 5 to 6 people had come in through her back door and forced her at gunpoint to go into her back garden. These people then took Bradley away, and that was the last time she saw him. But this was all she was willing to tell the police. The police continued their investigation for a number of months, and the police were able to find a number of other suspects, friends of Nick's. These were Albert Thorne, Ricky Smith, Jordan Bottom, Jaden Ball, and Alec Harvey. Let's start with Albert Thorne. Albert was a 58-year-old man who lived in the area, and he was friends with Nick. Through some investigatory work, the police suspected that Albert might have something to do with the disappearance. Albert owned a large amount of land, and so a search warrant was issued in late December of 2018. On his land, the police found a shed, and the shed floor appeared to have been freshly painted. The farm where Albert lived was described more as a rural slum, scattered with sheds, caravans, and cars. On the property, Albert also had a concrete tank that he used as a bunker to party. Those who would attend his parties were significantly younger than he was at the time, usually in their 20s. So who exactly is Albert Thorne? Well, not too much is known about him, other than he was part of a vigilante group that he and Nick had started. This group was established to find people who groom children and bring them to justice, which of course sounds like a noble cause. Albert had a giant tattoo of 2 crossed guns on his back, with the words Australian Freedom Fighters. This was the name of their vigilante group. While his property was being searched, Albert was questioned. Albert stated that Nick Stefani had confided in him, claiming that he believed that Bradley was harming Jana's children. Albert claimed that Nick had sought his advice about what to do, but Albert assured the police that he had nothing to do with the disappearance of Bradley, and with this, Albert was released. The police began to wonder what could have happened. Things clearly aligned. Bradley was accused of harming Jana's children, and Albert and Nick were part of a vigilante group designed to stop these people. They wondered if Bradley had been murdered by this group. Things would soon unravel, and the horrors of what Bradley endured would soon come to light. In March of 2019, Albert spoke with a neighbour of his and made remarks that he knew what happened to Bradley. This information was then given to the police. Albert was then subsequently arrested on the 13th of March 2019, months after the disappearance. It was here where Albert admitted that he played a role in the disappearance. He admitted that he and other people kidnapped Bradley and placed him into the back of a car. During the interrogation, Albert explained that a man named Jordan Bottom lived in a caravan on his property. Albert claimed that Jordan was also responsible for what happened to Bradley. The next morning, Jordan Bottom was arrested and taken to a police station for an interview, and right away he confessed. He told the police the news they had long suspected: Bradley had been killed. Once he confessed, Jordan Bottom agreed to take the police to the gravesite. In an isolated area, the badly decomposed body of Bradley was exhumed from the grave. His body was in a horrific state. It was clear that he had been tortured to an extreme degree. Only 98% of his skeleton was recovered, with both feet missing, half of his hand sawn off, and bones missing from his neck. Jordan then confessed further, implicating a number of other people. With this, Albert, Jana, and Nick Stefani were arrested, along with Ricky Smith, Alec Harvey, and Jaden Ball. What exactly happened to Bradley was then uncovered during interrogation. This is the official narrative. So, Bradley and Jana had been having some marital troubles. To get back at him, she told Nick Stefani that Bradley had preyed upon her daughters and may even have gotten one of them pregnant. She even claimed that Bradley had filmed his crimes and put them on the dark web for all to see. These allegations would rightly infuriate anyone who heard them, but this is the issue. These allegations were untrue. Jana had concocted a story fabricating that Bradley had committed the worst crime that one can commit. With this information, Nick went and met with Albert and told him about these allegations, and according to them, with their Australian freedom fighters organisation, they felt like they had to act, and so they began to plan. On the night of the 1st of December 2018, the day before Bradley would disappear, a meeting was held in the concrete tank where Albert would host parties. In this meeting was Jordan Bottom, Nick Stefani, and the others I mentioned. Everyone agreed that something needed to be done about these allegations. The plan was to attack Bradley and force a confession out of him and then hand him over to the police. They all agreed to take action. During the night, they corresponded via text message, and Jana was made aware of the plan. She was in on this too. On the 2nd of December, Albert went to a store and purchased 2 balaclavas and 2 rolls of duct tape. The gang then made their way over to Bradley's home. Albert, along with Nick Stefani, Ricky Smith, and Alec Harvey, entered Bradley's home through the rear door. On this day, Jana had planned to have the kids away to stay over at her mother's. As the gang entered, they passed Jana. She nodded as they made their way into the master bedroom where Bradley was sleeping. Alec Harvey and Ricky Smith each wore one of the balaclavas. Alec Harvey was armed with a metal pole, and Nick Stefani was armed with a sawn-off shotgun. The 4 men entered the master bedroom. Bradley was caught completely off guard. From this point onwards, the gang seemed to point fingers at each other and gave varying accounts. But here is what is believed to have happened from the various testimonies and the evidence that was gathered. The 4 men set about attacking Bradley in a ferocious manner. Nick Stefani kicked Bradley and punched him in the face. Alec used the metal pole to violently beat Bradley without mercy. Nick had a cigarette in his mouth. He pulled it from his mouth and extinguished the lit end into Bradley's eyeball. Bradley was then threatened with a sword and a shotgun was held to his head. Nick Stefani then forced the barrel of the shotgun into Bradley's mouth and threatened to kill him if he did not confess to the allegations. But Bradley, knowing he was innocent, refused. And so, without the desired confession, the beating continued. One of the men then used a lighter to burn Bradley's skin, and after a few minutes, Bradley was left bleeding and significantly injured by the savage and sustained attack. But this was just the start. His hands and feet were then bound with rope and duct tape. The house was fitted with CCTV, so the CCTV hard drive was taken from the house in hopes of removing any incriminating evidence. Nick Stefani carried Bradley to the boot of the gang's car. They all then drove to Albert's farm and parked the car there. Upon getting to Albert's property, Albert met with Jordan Bottom. According to those there, Albert was giddy with excitement and gleefully showed Jordan a terrified and bloodied Bradley in the boot of his car. Jordan Bottom had a girlfriend named Jessica McFarlane. The 2 of them lived together on Albert's property. Jordan had told Jessica about Bradley in the boot of the car. Jessica would later testify that she walked over to the car and tapped on the boot. After tapping, she heard someone scream. She heard Bradley shouting, "Get me out of here, or kill me now." This case occurred in December, which is one of Australia's hottest months. Bradley was left in the car for hours in the blistering heat, blooded, bashed and burned. While Bradley was in the boot, the gang decided what to do next and consulted in the concrete tank. There was discussion about further beating Bradley in order to extract a confession from him. The gang decided to use extreme torture. Albert then gave the orders as to what to do next. Jordan Bottom and Ricky Smith were told to get Bradley out of the car and take him to a shed on the property. Inside the shed, Bradley was tied to a massage table, and this is where the true horror would begin. A chainsaw was held over his head to make him confess. Boiling hot water from a kettle was then poured all over his skin, and then the gang savagely and brutally beat him to an inch of his life. According to those present, Bradley wet himself, something that Albert took great joy in. In fact, some of the gang members would later say that Albert became aroused by the extreme violence employed. Bradley continued to deny the allegations, and so with a saw, the gang began to hack through Bradley's hand. With many open wounds, the gang decided to cover his body with deep heat. Even with all of this, Bradley would not confess, something that angered the gang further, and so they decided to dispose of him instead. At around midnight, Bradley was loaded into the boot of the car and a towel was secured around his head. Albert, along with Jordan and Ricky Smith, set off in the vehicle and began driving. The gang had with them a shotgun and some shovels. They drove to an isolated area, an area which Albert knew like the back of his hand. He knew that no one would be around. The intention was to kill Bradley and bury his body where no one would ever find him. Once they reached their destination, Bradley was then carried out of the car into a wooded area and thrown to the ground. The men then dug a shallow grave. Bradley was then brought to his feet and guided over to the grave. Albert retrieved his shotgun, aimed the weapon at Bradley's leg, and fired. This shot at close range caused catastrophic injury to Bradley's leg. With this, he fell to the ground. It was reported by the gang that Bradley lay in the fetal position, likely knowing what was next. Albert then fired one last shot into the back of Bradley's head. Bradley's body was then buried, and the gang drove back to Albert's property. Following this sickening crime, the gang, including Yana, began concocting a plan to fool the police, hoping to pass off the disappearance of Bradley as his own doing. Later the following day, Albert spoke with his daughter who was 10. He told her that he had killed somebody the previous night, confessing that he and others had driven the man out to the bushland and bashed him with metal poles, justifying what he did by claiming that the man he killed was a bad man. And Yana, she explained to her little ones that Bradley had left for good, something that likely confused and upset them a great deal. A few days later, Albert invited his partners in crime over to his property and hosted a celebratory gathering. This gathering was attended by Yana, Nick Stefani, and Yana's children. Yana then cleaned up the master bedroom, and Albert got to work painting the makeshift torture chamber in his shed, covering up the many bloodstains. He dismantled and destroyed the massage table that Bradley was tortured on, cutting it into small pieces and burning it in a drum. Days then passed, and Bradley was reported missing. The investigation began and his body found, leading to the gang being caught. They were all subsequently arrested and questioned. The crime scenes were analysed and CCTV footage was recovered from neighbouring properties, placing them at the scene of the crime. The story I have just told was pieced together by a dedicated team of investigators who would describe the murder as terrifying. When Ricky Smith was questioned by the police, he was asked if he or any of the gang had any evidence that Bradley had even done these things. Ricky replied by saying, "I don't know, that's for sure. That's why I feel so stupid." Upon uttering these words, Ricky then began to cry. I have covered many cases just like this one, and they are always the most horrific. A gang of people get together to target an individual. Things spiral out of control, and what follows is the most extreme violence. Bradley, until the very end, never admitted to these allegations, and there is absolutely no evidence to suggest that he committed the crimes he was accused of. Jana was very well aware of Nick's organization. She knew that if she created this vulgar lie, the men would act and kill Bradley on her behalf. Nick Stefani, Jordan Bottom, Ricky Smith, Albert Thorne, Jana Hooper, Jaden Ball and Alec Harvey all pleaded not guilty to false imprisonment, kidnap and murder, and the trials would soon begin. It became clear from the evidence that Albert was the ringleader in this gruesome case. During the trial, Albert said, "The main thing at the end of the day is that I was trying to do the right thing and I went the wrong way about it. I have to live with the fact that I affected so many people. I was trying to get one person away from the girls, but it's ended up that so many other people have been hurt." It is reported that throughout the trial, the group expressed remorse for their crimes, and because of this remorse, it resulted in some rather lenient sentences. Let's start with Jana Hooper. Her turbulent upbringing and her remorse were used as mitigating factors. She was found guilty of false imprisonment. The judge acknowledged that none of this would have ever happened if it wasn't for her lies. But despite this, she was sentenced to one charge of intentionally causing harm, one charge of kidnapping, and one charge of false imprisonment. She was given 7 years and 6 months, with a minimum term of 4 years and 6 months. Next, Jordan. Jordan was sentenced to 9 years imprisonment with a non-parole period of 6 years. Ricky Smith was sentenced to 10.5 years imprisonment with a non-parole period of 7 years. Alec Harvey was sentenced to 8 years with a minimum term of 5 years for his role. Nicholas Stefani was not found guilty of murder, but he was found guilty of false imprisonment and intentionally causing harm. For this, he was sentenced to 10 years with a non-parole period of 7 years. Jaden Ball was sentenced to 2 years imprisonment with a non-parole period of 15 months. And finally, Albert. Albert was the only one found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with a non-parole period of 32 years, meaning that Albert will have to be 90 before he can be considered for parole. Following these sentences, a number of them have tried to appeal. The case of Bradley is truly disturbing and is a grim reminder of the importance of innocent until proven guilty.